Welcome to this edition of Optimal Talks. In this series of frank conversations, I will chat to a diverse range of security specialists and industry influencers to explore their opinions and ideas, picking apart some of the key issues we all face today. I hope you enjoy the next 30 minutes. If you do, leave us your thoughts and comments and spread the word. Thanks. This is the new webinar recording where we find interesting people from within the security industry and we ask them about, what drives them and what's going on. And the first one here, Charlie Swanson, not only the learning and development lead for optimal risk training and driving a lot of our course content going forward, but also a now multi-published author with his second book about to be released imminently, or just been released actually, Charlie, right?
23rd of this month, Rick.
23rd of this month. So they're available on pre-order though, aren't they?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
Brilliant. But I think if we're going to talk about your book and what drives you, Charlie, we need to know a little bit about you as an operator, your background. Tell us a bit about where your journey's come from and where your passion has derived from.
Well, I think probably the best way of explaining it, Rick, is I've been operational and I've been involved in training and education for 30 plus years now, and I've operated and trained all around the world. And I've spoken to multilingual learners, as it were, and somewhere along the line, almost during every conversation, somebody would say to me, you need to write a book about yourself. And that was primarily kind of aimed at me, which I thought not necessarily that could just be, another former squaddy who wants to talk about his time in the army, and there's too much of that. But then about probably 3.5 years ago, I was speaking to people within the industry, and there was a kind of a disconnect in the industry about where we're going, about who we are, about what we are. And people said to me, do you have any thoughts? I said, well, you actually have some strong passions because, we really need to identify ourselves. So I started to think about the first book, and I suppose slightly naively, I thought this is going to be quite easy. And I only allowed myself 10 months to write the book, which thinking back was crazy. It was absolutely almost suicidal. Where did the passion come from? The passion came from speaking to people within the industry who said, we really need a defined thought process here. And what I did, I reached out to some of the most important SMEs in the industry. I said, what kind of book do you think we need? That was the first thing I did, because I didn't have all the answers, of course. And I spoke to some very important people, frustrated people, who wanted this kind of book to be written. And it is. My first book is a warts and all book. It's how I see the industry. And then of course, I was still working full time. That's the book. Thank you very much. And I was still working. And the more I was speaking to people in the industry, the more I realized that we need to perhaps think more professional than we do, or than we have been. And so that was my first passion. And I thought to myself, now is the right time to do it. If I don't start to write a book now, I never will. So that's how I started, Rick.
But, the thing that makes you a credible author is the fact that you have written master's programs for universities and a lot of other experience. So you're just piling together a lot of past experience in academic course design and putting it into a book, right?
To a point. I mean, I really enjoyed writing the book. That's the first thing. I'm not sure my wife did, because I was almost divorced from our family on a number of occasions. And she was downstairs, I was upstairs writing. But there's a huge difference about writing an academic piece of work, particularly writing an academic program, and writing a book, shall we say. And what I probably enjoyed most about the first book, certainly, was my ability to say, this is how I see it as Charlie Swanson. These are my views. And I was given so much freedom. I wasn't tied down by empirical research all the time. It wasn't being marked. It wasn't being assessed. The only people that were going to assess it were the people who bought it, and the publishers, of course. So I did, to a certain extent, I had to employ academic protocols when I was writing, because nothing changes there. But I had the freedom, I suppose, to break out and say, in my opinion, which is the first time I've ever been able to say that. And I found that fascinating. And then later on, when people read the book, I mean, I had one person say to me, when I read it, it felt as though you were sat on the sofa alongside me reading it to me. And that's what I wanted. That's absolutely what I want. for that book. But then, of course, the second book is different.
This is what I loved about the first book. Professional Security Management is a strategic guide, but it is very much a practitioner's Bible. And you know, there are a number of good guides out there, but this one I felt was very much sympathetic to the operator, and it bridged that strategic to operational gap. And you know what, people will take it. I took some things out of this and I was like, well, I used the concept of that and I tweaked it to the way it needed to be, because obviously this is not a dictatorial book saying you must do it this way. It's a guide.
Not. Yeah,
it's a guide, and that's what I like. And so, I mean, God, I don't think I could ever write a book, but I'm fascinated to know about the process of how on earth did you ever, first of all, were you drunk when you went, right, I'm going to commit to this? Because that's how my mad ideas usually start. You know, how did it come from an acorn of an idea to being committed? And then what I want to do is talk through the journey. So first of all, what was the acorn?
I suppose I was inspired by Professor Martin Gill.
Right.
Is the first thing to say, because Martin and I go back a long time. He was one of my first lecturers, and you've got his book. As
another book that I've, yes, absolutely, yeah.
And I was inspired by Martin because Martin, I remember when he first started writing books, it wasn't easy. It never is. And then I was also inspired by people saying to me, "We need this book." And I suppose also the third challenge was, can I do it? And that's key, because you know we have to believe in ourselves. Right. And I started to think about it. I spoke to my family, I spoke to colleagues, I spoke to close friends, and of course they all said, "Yeah, of course you can do it, Charlie." But then it comes that time when you approach the publisher, and I'll get onto that now. A good friend of mine actually introduced me to Routledge, and Dr. Amy Burrows. She's been writing for a long time, Amy, and she introduced me to Routledge, and she gave me a point of contact, and that's critical, because if you think about it, publishers and publishing houses receive thousands of proposals every year, and they had to sift through them. So Amy gave me a point of contact, Rebecca, who's the managing editor, and I just wrote her an informal email. I said, "Look, I'm interested in developing this book for this industry," and she said, "That sounds great." She then sent me the proposal. The proposal itself is almost as difficult as writing the book, because what you have to do, you have to prove to the publishers that this is a book they need. And let's face it, it's a business, and this is a book they can sell. Yeah. But first and foremost, it has to have integrity. You have to say to them, "This is the reason why I want to write the book, and this is the reason why I think you should publish it, because I've been asked to write this book by colleagues and SMEs who think the book is needed." And then Routledge themselves, Routledge were excellent, are excellent, I'd say, extremely professional, as you would imagine. And they guided me all the way through to the point where I started to write it. And that's when you're by yourself. At that stage, there's no umbilical cord anymore.
Right. So this is where I'm fascinated, and you know, I've been through a master's degree. I know what it means for, you know, trying to put self-discipline first and not procrastinating on other things. You know, it's forming a habit. So how did you and how do you manage your own self-discipline?
Well, as you know, Rick, I mean, you and I both come from a background where in our first lives, we had to manage our time. In the world of flood protection, you've got to manage your time. And I'm pretty good at self-discipline. And, you know, it's almost akin to physical exercise. You know, very often I'll say, "I'm going to go for a run, but it's raining, so maybe I won't go." So I would wake up in the morning and think, right, I need to work on my book today, but actually I need to do A, B, and C. Then I would step back and say, actually, you don't need to do A, B, and C. You need to focus on your book. Right. And it's down to belief in yourself. It's down to support, but it's down to self-discipline. It's getting up in the morning and saying, "This is what I've got to do today." And very often, as you know, most people know, we say, "I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it at the weekend," and it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. You've got to do it there and then. And it's things like, for anybody who's like yourself, who's studied at degree level, master's level, it's being disciplined in terms of the process. So whenever I'm doing research, every book I use immediately goes into the cupboard behind me. I start my bibliography from day one. And I answer it on a day-to-day basis. So don't get to the point at the end of the book where I'm scrabbling to try and find quotes. So it's just the minutiae of that detail. But in actual fact, the essence of it is psychological. It's saying to yourself, I've got to do this. And also, people need to remember that once you sign the contract with the publishers, that's the time limit. There's no leeway. It's either 18 months or 2 years, and that's it.
So how does the engagement with the publisher work? Is it monthly review meetings? Is it more frequent?
No, it isn't. There are no review meetings. From the time I'll go back to the proposal itself. The proposal itself is very detailed, very lengthy, and it has to be. Once the proposal goes through the editing board, the author is sent a contract, which he or she signs, and that's it. That's it until the time that their manuscript goes in, 18 months or 2 years later. I mean, of course, the support I had from Routledge, if I needed to speak to anybody, they would have been there.
Yeah.
But there's nothing formal. There are no monthly meetings. There are no review procedures. It's you start on day one and you finish on day whatever it is, and you send them the manuscript. It then goes through the formal process. It goes to the managing editor. It will go to a technical team. It'll then go to the editing board, and they say yes or no.
So tell me about your sort of research methodology. So you've already alluded that it's different to writing academic work. You have more freedom. So how do you choose your material?
In the first instance, probably the most important part of the book is visualizing the chapters and the structure.
Right.
So let's say there are 10 chapters. You then have to identify what each chapter consists of and how you're going to write. For instance, in the first book, I looked at terrorism, I looked at retail, I looked at academia. And then you need to find the people within those areas that you can trust, and that's key. That you can trust, you can speak to. It isn't as formal in this book. It isn't as formal as an academic piece of work, but it's all about trust. It's identifying the people that can help you and trusting them that they will. And after that, it's the same protocols. It's the same protocols as research. So it's Harvard bibliography, it's plagiarism, it's referencing, and because that's what the publisher is also looking for at the end.
Yeah. So I want to talk more about the format in the new book. Tell us what the title of your new book that's about to be released is.
Well, the new book is the Security Risk Handbook, Assess, Survey, Audit, and it's based on a conversation that we've had before, which some time ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I identified what I saw as the risk journey. Yeah. And the risk journey is I've argued for maybe decades that a professional security manager, for lack of a better phrase, cannot carry out a physical survey unless they understand the risk. It's really quite basic. We need to understand the risk first. We then carry out the physical survey, and then sometime later we carry out an audit to ensure standards are the same. So this book, the second book, is more, well, the name's in the title. It's a handbook. It looks at, in my opinion, how to carry out a security risk assessment, how to carry out a security survey, and how to carry out something which is very rarely done, and that's a security audit. And you see, the other problem, Rick, is within the industry, and I've been teaching surveying and risk assessing for 30 years. And I found that every time I speak to my learners, I say to them, please tell me the difference between security risk assessment and security survey. I get blank looks. Somebody will say, it's about threats, it's about vulnerabilities. Isn't it about impact? And they don't realize that it's all part of a process. Is that risk is a process. Risk is almost like mathematics. It's a theory. It's an underpinning theory. But the likes of threats, vulnerabilities, assets, and so on all come under that framework. So in this book, I'm attempting to say to people, this is how you should carry out a security risk assessment in these 7 areas. So again, I've looked at corporate, I've looked at retail, I've looked at close protection, and so on and so forth. From that risk assessment, we take it forward to the survey area, concentrating on the same field. So let's say I'll carry out, in the book, I'll carry out a security risk assessment of a venue in a fictitious city in England, which is used for pop concerts. And I'll carry out the risk assessment. I'll then take that forward to surveying the same building. Yeah. And later on in the book, I'll then carry out a security audit of that building. And that goes throughout the book. And one of I think the USPs of this book is something I've been trying to kind of establish for a number of years. Generally, when people carry out risk assessments and surveys in particular, and sometimes audits, they don't use a template. They don't use a framework. Within this book, and it took a lot of haggling with Routledge over this, whoever buys this book will have the opportunity to download a series of templates straight to the tablets or the laptops.
Brilliant.
And those templates can be used. And standardization, again, I might not have got it exactly right. And I say in the book, these are my templates. Please add, alter, or adjust as you wish. But they are there to help you. And it means that it means that a person who's not a recognized or qualified surveyor can go on site with the tablets and say, okay, here's the templates. How did Charlie recommend I approach this part of the survey? And it can be adjustable, it can be saved, it can be then printed. And I think that's a major USP. I don't think that's out there at all.
No, I don't think I've seen that. And certainly not something that comes with a book.
No.
But then that just feeds into the handbook concept. You know, you're giving people a good, solid pathway to follow, the journey, the risk journey into the survey and the audit, and then giving them the tool to apply their theory to it, which is, I think that's a key, a unique selling point for this publication. How did you come to, I mean, you obviously have had decades of your mindset and your belief about the risk journey and how it's going. So it probably wasn't that difficult to structure your chapters. But how did you go through the process of making sure that it fits with and it felt right to you, and then tweaking it, you know, and what's the process with that?
Well, I suppose the process was based on my practical application, what I've done over the years. For instance, I had an argument with a good colleague of mine maybe 10, 15 years ago about the necessity of the risk assessment. And this particular friend of mine, who's very senior, very intelligent guy, said, as far as I'm concerned, you don't need to know the risk before you do a survey. And I said, well, that's nonsense. That's absolute nonsense. And so I would look at particular areas, and one particular area, one task that I was placed with an international communications company several years ago was to carry out surveys of the buildings around the world. And what they did for me, I'm pleased to say, is every time I arrived on site for the survey, they will have sent me the risk assessment for that site.
Right.
And it worked a treat. Because I could actually, you know, as let's say I was looking at the CCTV system, I wasn't just looking to see that the cameras worked. I was looking to understand that they were appropriate to the risk. And that's key. That's absolutely key. And then once, of course, you then link that to the operational requirement, you've got the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
And then later on, I also knew from my experience in the industry, what tends to happen is people will carry out a risk assessment and a survey of a location. They'll present it to the client and step back and forget about it.
Yeah.
When in actual fact, what we should be doing is following up to make sure the client is still meeting the requirements. If he or she wants to do that, we can't force them to do it. Yeah. But it's very, very often it helps them. When we go back and say, okay, during the survey, these are the standards that we agreed with. Are you still meeting these standards? And that helps the client. And again, that's all about communications and business support to the client. It isn't just a case of saying, here's the risk assessment, there's the survey, when do I receive my check?
Yeah.
It's approaching them and saying, this is, I hate to use the term, a one-stop shop. We'll be your service provider for as long as you want us to be. And what we'll do, we will make sure that from now on, you are aware of the standards that you need to stick to. And that's worked. And that was the risk journey, that was the assessment, the survey, the audit, based on my experience.
So I just want to talk about, you know, because obviously you're developing for optimal risk training, developing a security surveying course at the moment that's going through, you know, the routes of accreditation and so on. Would that course be based upon the concept in the book?
Absolutely. Yeah. It will mimic the book. It will mimic the risk journey, because that isn't out there at the moment. I know that for a fact. And that kind of that also made me think about my present proposal, because it's linked again. And as you know, I have a proposal in at the moment with Routledge for my third book.
That's what my next question was. What's next?
Well, the next one is, my proposal to Routledge is security technology in the 21st century, man and machine. Now, I was going to say man versus machine. That wouldn't have been appropriate. That would have been confrontational straight away. And the idea of this particular book is to say exactly where are we as an industry in terms of security technology? Where are we? How do we get to where we are? Are we accepting technology or are we averse? Where do we go from here? You see, very often when I was teaching surveying or when I teach surveying, when I'm teaching on the technology side, I will always say to my learners, when do you think machines will take over from men? And straight from human beings, sorry. And straight away, they will say never. The defensive mechanism comes up straight away. Never, it's not going to happen. So I step back and say, okay, let's look at this logically. Think about how quickly technology has developed, exponentially. In 1946, a German scientist said, and he was laughed at, a German scientist said, one day we'll have a computer that is smaller than a room. And they all laughed at him. I said, think about this. Think about where we will be in 5, 10, 15 years. And it isn't the technology itself. That's almost irrelevant. It's how we apply it. And once again, I've spoken to experts, yourself included, Rick. I've spoken to experts about this, and they've said, we need to know. If we can, we need to know where we are. Well, what levels of acceptance do we have and where we're going to be? Because if, in my opinion, if we don't embrace, I hate to use that term, if we don't embrace and accept technology, we'll wither on the vine.
Well, you know, we are irrefutably in the fourth industrial revolution. The integration of humans and technology is here. I think, and in our own sphere of security, third generation of crime prevention through environmental design is the integration of technology into the defensible space theories, defensible architecture, but also now smart cities and, you know, urban planning is this is all about technology in this third generation. I'd be fascinated to be involved, and you know I will be. But where are we going with threats in the metaverse, virtual reality? You know, there are frauds and there's people buying land in the metaverse now. This is Ready Player One, and with the, you know, with the fast developments of blockchain and quantum computing, there are lots of people that are theorizing into this. So I think that this will be a really interesting publication, but you'll have to be fast on the writing because it's evolving as fast as you can write it down the page, right?
And that's key. And that's key. When I first started to think about this, of course, I was very aware that somebody's going to say to me, yes, but Charlie, how can you keep up? And I don't intend to try and keep up. That would be ludicrous. All I can do, wrong. What I will do is, as always, I will speak to the people that I believe have the answers to those questions. Charlie Swanson doesn't have the answers. Of course not. And I don't have the answer to any of the questions I've asked in my other books. When I'm teaching surveying, I say to my learners, you know, you're just scraping the surface. When you get on site, if you're asked a question and you try and bluff, you'll be caught out. Eventually you'll be caught out. You've got to speak to the right people. And that's been the same, I hate to say this, throughout my publishing career so far, I've spoken to the right people, Rick. And I think if my proposal is accepted and it's gone through the first stage and the managing editor has said, this looks extremely interesting and challenging, if it's accepted, it will be by far the most difficult piece of work I've ever carried out. There's no question. But once again, what I will do, as I have done with both other books, is continually communicate with people that I trust. Speak to people, show them parts that I've written. What do you think about this theory? Am I off track? I started doing a first degree with the Open University in the late 80s. I didn't complete it because of my time in the military. And it was called the Practical Application of Technology. And even then in the 80s, people were saying, it isn't just the technology, it's how we accept it, embrace it, and use it. And as you know, in the security industry, we've not been the fastest sector in the world to accept technology. We're sometimes split. We'll have people who will not accept technology no matter what, you know, but we've always done it this way. We've always had security guards. And I'm not arguing against that. And we'll then have on the other side, we'll have people who say, but we can't live without technology. And to me at the moment, there's a happy medium. But I don't know where we're going to be in 5, 10, 15, 20 years time. As you said before, you know, as Klaus Fuchs says, we are in the fourth industrial revolution. And we know in the next 10 years, probably, lower management skills will be taken over by machines. But senior management, we don't know. and we don't know where technology is going to be, and that's the aim of the book.
Brilliant. Well, and I've no doubt that you will smash it out the park. I've seen your work ethic with optimal risk training, the courses, and the learning development piece that you've done for us. I'm excited to read and have the book physically in my hand, having read the manuscripts before. Seeing it in hard copy like this is exciting. So remind us again the title of the book, when it's being released, and where you can get it from, because people will ask that from watching this.
It is the Security Risk Handbook, Assess, Survey, Audit. It's released on the 23rd of January. It will be released primarily through Routledge, but it will be with Amazon and Waterstones, and it will also be on the Routledge webpage. It will be released in paperback, hardback, and also on Kindle. 23rd of January.
And available for pre-order now.
Absolutely.
Yep. Charlie, this has been fascinating. These Optimal Minds things, I know I'm going to love doing these, because it's been a really fascinating and enjoyable conversation for me, and I talk to you pretty much every day anyway, but this has been insightful. So thanks very much for your time. Good luck with the publication, and I'll chat to you later.
One thing I'd like to say before we go is another very important part is in any kind of high level book is having the right person to write the foreword for it, and you very kindly wrote that for me, so thank you.
That was a pleasure.
All right, thank you very much. I'll see you later.
If you enjoyed this webinar, we will be doing these fairly frequently, probably a couple a month to start with. If you have ideas of people you would like to hear from as interviewees, then fire that into me. My email's rick.mounfield@optimalrisk.com. See you next time. Cheers, Charlie.